Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. That's great. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the press event for the U.S. bipartisan congressional delegation led by Chairman Mike Gallagher of the House Select Committee on the strategic competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. First, please allow me to introduce our distinguished guest, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Joseph Wu, Representative Mike Gallagher, Chairman of the House Select Committee on the CCP, Representative Raja Krishnamurthy, Ranking Member of the House Select Committee, Representative John Mulenar, Representative Seth Morton, Representative Dusty Johnson. And in the beginning, I would like to invite Minister Wu to address the audience.
Oh, me? Perfect. Hey.
I didn't realize that I have to say anything, but I want to welcome the distinguished member of the Select Committee to come to Taiwan. As we know very well, Taiwan has been under tremendous military, economic, and also hybrid coercion by the PRC. And therefore, for us, China or the PRC is a prime issue for us. And the committee led by Chairman Mike Gallagher has been a tremendous supporter of Taiwan. And we would like to welcome them to Taiwan to speak about our bilateral relations with the United States, to speak about the regional situation, and most important of all, we want them to tell us how Taiwan and the United States are going to work closer with each other in order for us to be able to deal with the coercion presented by the PRC. And on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I would like to extend my most sincere welcome to the members of this Select Committee. And now, let me invite the chairperson.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be here today, and this is my second trip to Taiwan. It's the ranking member's second trip to Taiwan. Slightly less fanfare traveling with me than with the Speaker of the House, Pelosi, at the time. Seth has been here. This is his second trip. We have two that are coming for their first time, but it's an amazing, amazing place. And I was eager to come back and look forward to many return journeys in the future. We had a fantastic meeting with President Tsai. She's been a remarkable friend and partner, and really a partner of this committee, because one of the biggest and first things we did was welcome President Tsai at the Reagan Library in the United States for a day that really set the tone for our entire committee's work, and what a historic and remarkable presidency she has had. We also had a great meeting with President-elect William Lai, and we're very excited about just the opportunity to continue to deepen the partnership between the United States and Taiwan, and very confident that that will happen in the future. What you're seeing here today is a group of legislators, Democrats and Republicans, here on, I think, fundamentally a mission of peace, thinking through what we can do to enhance peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. And the closer that we interact, legislators in America, legislators in Taiwan, I think the better chance we have at preserving the peace. And in the committee's work, it's clear that the foremost threat to peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait is the increasing aggression of the Chinese Communist Party. That is the mission we've been tasked with, is understanding that threat and figuring out ways we can, in bipartisan fashion in the United States, combat it in pursuit of peace. And one of the things I said in the very first hearing we ever did, I drew attention to something that an obscure Chinese academic wrote in 1991 in a book called America Against America. This was a critique of the nihilism and internal conflict he found at the heart of American society. These days, that academic is one of the most powerful men in the world, and his name is Wang Huning. He's a member of the 7-person Politburo Standing Committee, which is the highest governing body within the CCP. It occurs to me, after a year of doing this with my friends, that America Against America also describes the strategy that Wang, that Xi Jinping, and the CCP have pursued in the years since, in America, in Taiwan, and around the world, a strategy of pitting people against each other to undermine our countries and our resolve. It's also the strategy they pursue on the international stage. Divide and conquer. Divide countries, divide allies, divide partners, divide the free world. But being here today, I am extremely confident that that strategy is failing. Standing here together, we are evidence of that failure. Democrats and Republican, blues and greens, the people of Taiwan and the people of America united against authoritarian aggression. There's a saying, dictatorships like that, which we see in China, are much like ducks. On the surface, they appear calm and steady, but underneath, out of view, there's a lot of chaos. In contrast, thriving democracies are like the ocean. On the surface, they're chaotic, they're seemingly messy, they're not designed for efficiency, they're full of disagreements, especially when you have divided government like we have in the United States. But underneath those choppy waves, they are calm, they are strong, and they are unbeatable. Free people don't need a dictator to tell them what to think. They know the truth. They see the Chinese Communist Party for what it is, a Marxist-Leninist regime for which people are mere tools for the party. And free people know what is at stake, our dignity, our rights, and our freedoms. They know that this is about what kind of world we want to live in, and they're standing up for what's right. The United States, Democrats, and Republicans stands with Taiwan for your freedom and for ours. For as Taiwan goes, so goes the world. Taiwan must remain, as it stands today, a candle, burning freely, fiercely, and improbably against the darkness. So thank you to our friends in Taiwan for your hospitality. Congratulations on a remarkable election and another peaceful transfer of power. We look forward to doing everything in our power as legislators to deepening this partnership for decades to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Now I would like to invite Representative Krishnamurthy to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and as I like to say, it's an honor to be any place they can pronounce my name correctly. So thank you. I was here at this very spot 2 years ago in a little noticed visit by then Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And we had a lunch on the other side of that door in that great banquet hall to talk about our relationship and how do we grow it, how do we deepen it, how do we strengthen it. And so that was a Democratic speaker who brought a delegation with her. And now we have Chairman Gallagher, a Republican, leading another bipartisan delegation here to continue that very dialogue. Now, today we had a variety of meetings, including with President Tsai and President-elect Lai, and I just have to say they were extremely productive, they were candid, and there was a lot of give and take, and we learned a lot. Here were my 3 takeaways from those meetings. First of all, there is deep bipartisan support for the relationship with Taiwan and for the status quo, and no unilateral changes being made to the status quo. We strongly support President-elect Lai and President Tsai's continuing insistence that all differences between the PRC and Taiwan be resolved peacefully. That's very important. The second takeaway that I had was that the people of Taiwan, just as the people of the United States and people around the world, are watching what's unfolding in Ukraine very closely. Very closely. And in fact, at our meeting, President-elect Lai showed us a picture of what some people had grown in the way of blue and gold orchids in Taiwan in their symbol of standing by the people of Ukraine. But what was much more important than anything else in that conversation about Ukraine is making sure that the people of Ukraine succeed in beating back authoritarianism and the criminal invasion by Russia. And that is why we are so keen on making sure that the supplemental appropriations bill that the U.S. Senate has sent to make sure that Ukraine is properly aided actually succeeds in the House as well. Because as President-elect Lai made very clear, and President Tsai, if for some reason the Ukrainians do not prevail, that will only encourage hostilities against Taiwan. The third takeaway is that same supplemental package has important resources for the Indo-Pacific region. And again, all the people that we talked about said it was so important for us to continue to invest in the Indo-Pacific defenses and making sure that we deter and we discourage any hostilities. Because at the end of the day, it's about discouraging hostilities, discouraging conflict, and making peace. So with that, I say thank you again.
Thank you, Representative. And now I would like to open the floor to questions. Because the delegation has a busy schedule, we will only take 4 questions. So if you have questions, raise your hand and tell everybody your name and the medium you belong to. And Ben.
Thank you. I'm Ben Blanchard from Reuters. Chairman Gallagher, we've seen over the last couple of weeks, former President Trump has expressed many doubts about the role of NATO and about supporting Ukraine, which everyone is well aware of. If President Trump wins re-election at the end of this year, do you think that these comments about NATO and about Ukraine are a worrying sign of support for continued support for Taiwan? Do you believe that under a Trump administration that there would be continued support for Taiwan, or might there be a rollback of support? Thank you.
Well, I'm very confident that support for Taiwan will continue regardless of who occupies the White House, in large part because of what you're seeing here today. I actually think support for Taiwan in the United States Congress, which is supposed to be the dominant branch of our government. Article 1 is where most of the power constitutionally lies in our republic. I see growing and extremely strong support for Taiwan. And if you look at the work of our committee over the last year, the first report we released, the first major bipartisan thing we did, was a set of recommendations called 10 for Taiwan, which passed unanimously out of our committee. And then we turned about 7 out of those 10 into legislative reality via the National Defense Authorization Act. So I'm confident, regardless of how the presidential election goes, that we will maintain our support not only for Taiwan, but also a posture of internationalism and engagement. I think we all recognize that for America to succeed, we need to have allies and partners, and we need to look for ways to deepen those relationships, particularly as we look to reset simultaneously our economic relationship with China and reduce our dependency on China for critical goods. The only way that works is if we intensify simultaneously our economic and technological partnerships with places like Taiwan. And there, I think we still have a lot to do. We've passed the double taxation agreement in the House in a tax bill. It needs to pass the Senate. I would personally be in favor of exploring a free trade agreement with Taiwan. There's all sorts of ways where we can revitalize that economic proactive agenda. And I think it's up to Congress to step up. So that, I'll say one final note on this, and I understand why the presidential election occupies such a big place and is a source of media speculation. We've had kind of a debate in the last few months about certain things like, what are the guardrails we should put on American investment in China? Should we adopt a stricter set of guardrails? And we get a lot of pushback from Wall Street and people in corporate America. But something I say to them is that it's actually better for Congress to step up and legislate a solution to this, even if you may disagree with it or maybe a little bit more strict than you would have come up with. Because if Congress does it, if the legislature steps up and does it, it will last far beyond a change in a presidential administration. Otherwise, we go back and forth wildly between executive orders, and that's just a recipe for chaos. So my confidence stems from the fact that on our committee, we've had a great degree of bipartisanship, and I want to make absolutely clear that I think the people of Taiwan should be confident that America stands with them, even as we sort through a very intense political season domestically.
My name is Charlotte Young, and I'm with Liberty Times in Taiwan. And my question is for Mr. Gallagher.
Oh, there you are. Sorry.
We're seeing China's expansion in the Indo-Pacific region during countries with diplomatic ties with Taiwan. More recently, Nauru and possibly Tuvalu. What's U.S. response strategy, and how would you interpret such actions from China? Thank you.
Great question. I think one thing that's come out of some of the tabletop exercises that we've done on the committee is that not only do we need to get the military investments right in the region, and I think that is the most important thing. We need to ensure that we're delivering on the foreign military sales that you've purchased, that we've approved, but have yet to be delivered. We have a $20 billion backlog. That's probably the biggest thing we can do to deter China and reduce its aggression. But we also need a coordinated economic strategy with our allies and partners, so we're not making up a response when China does something that could be labeled economic warfare. We're not trying to improvise what the sanctions response is. And so doing a lot more thinking with Taiwan, with some of our treaty allies in the region about a coordinated allied framework to resist CCP economic coercion, I think is the direction we need to go. You mentioned Nauru. I think it's fair to say, and Mr. Moulton actually, we were talking about this earlier, he just returned, he was in Japan before this. It's critical that American legislators get to the region and express support, particularly in areas where we tend not to pay as much attention to. For example, right now in the United States, we're having a debate about renewing and appropriating money for the compact and free association states in the region. Absolutely critical that we do things like that. Developing expertise in countries like the Philippines, deep regional expertise, Indonesia, area where we know we're just going to have to stay engaged. It's my experience that that attention goes a long way, and we just have to show up. We have to be here in the region, constantly signaling to our friends that we stand with them, and constantly signaling to our enemies that we won't stand by as they pursue the route of aggression.
Thank you, Chairman. Eric.
Hello, this is Eric from CNN. Welcome to Taiwan. And I basically have a follow-up question to what Ben asked earlier. So over the last few months, obviously there have been growing debates in the United States about continuing to fund Ukraine in its war in its defense against Russia's invasion. What would be your message of reassurance to the Taiwanese people that they shouldn't be concerned about potential U.S. commitments toward Taiwan, given the internal divisions over Ukraine? Thank you.
Well, what is it that Winston Churchill said about America? We can always be counted on to do the right thing after we've exhausted all the other alternatives. So just give us some time to exhaust the alternatives, and we'll eventually get there. But at least I'll speak for myself. I think it's absolutely, and what we've heard today is that the outcome in Ukraine matters not only for Ukraine and American credibility, but for deterrence in the Indo-Pacific, for cross-strait deterrence. And increasingly what I see is a de facto alliance between China and Russia, and to a lesser extent Iran. It's you could call it an axis of authoritarian powers that is determined to undermine, if not destroy, American global leadership and our entire alliance structure that we've painstakingly built over the last several decades. And so I think it's important that we continue to fund with lethal assistance to Ukrainians, and also use this as a moment where we can revitalize our entire defense industrial base and make a generational investment in restoring our arsenal of deterrence so that we can surge production of and stockpile critical munitions here in the Indo-Pacific before deterrence fails. And that's absolutely critical because unlike Ukraine, Taiwan, as you may have noticed, is an island, and therefore it would be harder to resupply in the event of a conflict. We need to learn the lessons of why deterrence failed in Ukraine, apply them to the Indo-Pacific so that we don't find ourselves having to fight a war. We want peace, and though deterrence is very difficult, war is much more difficult. And so an ounce of deterrence is worth a pound of war, and that's what we're dedicating ourselves to, and I'm confident we'll find a way forward.
I think that one of the most interesting things that we found at our hearings that we had recently is that, for instance, Secretary Pompeo, Mike Pompeo, Republican, came out very strongly in favor of this aid for Ukraine. Why? Because he said, if we don't provide this aid to Ukraine, it's going to be viewed as a sign of weakness by our adversaries, making war more likely over Taiwan. Another thing that came out in that hearing is I'll remember this very clearly. A witness said, you can't be tough on China and weak in your support of Ukraine. You can't. You can't be inconsistent. And so that's why I'm telling everybody in good faith on both sides of the aisle, we got to get this done now. Not tomorrow, now. The moment we go back. And it's going to take time once we pass that aid for it to actually get translated into actual equipment and material on the battlefield. And now is a time of desperation in Ukraine. And we cannot flinch in the face of what I think is evil. We have to perform at this moment.
Thank you, representatives. So the last question goes to Joe.
Hi, Senator. This is Joseph from Central News Agency in Taiwan. First of all, welcome to Taiwan to all the first or second time Congressman. You have mentioned about deterrence, and the last time you visited here in 2023, you expressed concern about the backlog, about the delay of delivery of weapons to Taiwan. And now, exactly a year later, the problem is still there. So is there anything that the U.S. Congress can do to speed up that delivery process amid China's continued expansion? And another side note is that the last time you hear is more secretive. Is there a reason why the last time you visit is more low profile and this time more publicly? Thank you.
I was low profile last time. He'll say something and I'll follow up, yeah.
On the first part, I think the Biden administration has done a tremendous amount to try to expedite the shipment of arms and articles of self-defense to Taiwan. All that being said, we know that the defense industrial base is under tremendous stress right now, and that's why, as part of our 10 for Taiwan recommendations, one of the things that we have recommended and Chairman Gallagher has championed as a member of the House Armed Services Committee is multi-year appropriations. This is something that's the biggest no-brainer ever, and yet we're not doing it in Washington, D.C. What that means is basically allowing companies that produce, say, bullets, to know that there's going to be business or demand for those bullets over a certain number of years, as opposed to just 1 year. If it's just 1 year, they'll only make investments to make sure that enough bullets are completed that 1 year. But what we're realizing is that we need it over an extended period of time. So that's the fundamental challenge that we have. But another thing that we talked about is that we should start thinking about what we can co-produce here in Taiwan with regard to those items where perhaps you don't need a lot of intellectual property to be transferred, but you do need industrial capacity to be dedicated to it. So for instance, 155 artillery. This is in incredibly short supply around the world. We know this in Ukraine to be the case. And Taiwan could be a potentially great partner in the production of 155 millimeter artillery. but there are so many other attritable items. These are items that we know would be required for deterrence that they can make locally, and that we don't have to worry about necessarily stressing the supply chains in other parts of the world. Mike?
Well, in addition to, well, first of all, the backlog remains a huge problem. And it's something I try and raise at every opportunity. And I think it's a fixable problem, which makes it even more frustrating. Part of it has to do with the way in our system authority over foreign military sales is divided between the State Department and the Defense Department, and then in Congress between the Armed Services Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. It creates jurisdictional issues and oversight issues. But the ranking member is absolutely correct. In my opinion, the single best thing we can do is provide multi-year appropriation for critical munition, which allows these companies to move from minimum sustaining rates of production to maximum production rates and invest in workforce, in facilitization, and everything you need to go to 240 long-range anti-ship missiles a year, and you can list the other systems. One creative option that I've encouraged the administration to pursue is taking the harpoons that we have in our inventory, which we're about to put into deep storage, about 200 of them, we're gonna just kind of put them into deep freeze, reconfiguring them and then allowing them to be delivered in an expedited fashion to Taiwan, as well as something you saw in our report, which was moving Taiwan to the front of the line for priority for the delivery of harpoons. That will require some creative diplomacy with some of our Gulf allies, but I think that's absolutely doable going forward. As for the nature of the visit being more high profile than last time, I mean, I was by myself last time, and so I just, you know, and I think you had a high profile visitor from the Defense Department at the time who stole all of my thunder and got all the news headlines, which was fine. But I think this time, since we have a bipartisan delegation, and since you just had an election, we thought it was very important to publicly send a signal of unified American support for Taiwan. We felt like that would be a good signal, not only just here in Taiwan, but throughout the region. I also have to say your shoes are great. I really like those. You got to tell me where I can purchase a pair of those. Those would not be low profile though if I purchased those. So.
Thank you, Representative. Before we conclude this press event, so at the request of all media friends, so I would like to invite all our distinguished guests and the minister one step forward for a group photo. Okay, let me thank once again for the delegation for traveling from afar to be with us today. I also like to thank all media friends for attending this event. Thank you very much and wish everyone a good day.